So, you're aiming for a band 9.0 in IELTS speaking? Perfect! You're in exactly the right place. We're about to break down the exact techniques you need to absolutely master part 1 of the test. All right, this masterclass from the IELTS Focus is all about practical, high-scoring techniques. We're not going to waste time with boring theory. We're getting straight into the core strategies that are going to boost your performance in IELTS speaking part 1. Okay, first up, and this is probably the most fundamental thing you need to know. The single biggest mistake people make in part 1 is giving a really short, one-sentence answer. Let's look at exactly how to avoid that and show the examiner the kind of fluency they're looking for. Here's the method. It's super simple. Every single answer you give should have 2 parts. First, you just respond directly to the question. And second, you immediately extend that answer. You can add a reason, a possible result, or a little contrast. It sounds simple, but trust me, it's incredibly effective. Just look at the difference here. The weak answer, not really. It just stops. It's a dead end. But the band 9 answer, it starts with that same direct response, but then it extends with a reason and a result. See? That is what shows real fluency. All right, let's try this with the topic of music. The direct answer is just, yes, pretty much. Simple, right? But the extension gives a clear reason. It helps with concentration. Notice how that little addition completely transforms a basic yes into a much more developed, fluent response. Okay, how about cooking? Someone could just say, sometimes. But using a phrase like, to some extent, already shows a better vocabulary. Then the extension adds a really nice contrast, enjoying it when there's time, but ordering food when busy. That contrast adds depth and shows you can handle more complex sentences. And one more on social media. The candidate responds directly, I do, but then right away adds some nuance with, although I try to limit it. The extension then explains the potential negative result, wasting hours, which makes the whole answer feel way more personal and authentic, not like something you memorized. But listen, it's not just about what you say. It's also about how you say it. So our next technique is all about sounding less like you're reading from a textbook and more like a real person having a normal conversation. This is absolutely critical for a high score. So what's the secret here? It's using what we call discourse markers. Now, that sounds a bit academic, but it's really just these small words and phrases, like well or actually, that native speakers use all the time without even thinking. They're essential for making your speech flow and sound completely natural. Take the word actually. When you start your sentence with this, it kind of softens your response. It signals to the listener that you're about to say something maybe a little unexpected. You don't like the gym, but you do like staying active. It's just a very natural way to introduce that contrast. Oh, and to be honest, this is such a great phrase. It makes your answer sound so spontaneous and genuine, as if you're sharing a real thought in that moment. It's perfect for giving an opinion without it sounding rehearsed. Well is basically your best friend in the speaking test. It's a natural filler that gives you just a split second to gather your thoughts. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's a feature of native-like speech. It shows the examiner you're actively thinking, not just spitting out a pre-made script. Now this one, mind you, is a little more sophisticated, and that's a good thing. It's a fantastic way to add a contrasting point. It doesn't just make your answer more coherent, it shows the examiner you've got a wider vocabulary and can talk about things with a bit more nuance. Okay, for our final technique, we're going to tackle that moment every single candidate dreads, when the examiner throws you a complete curveball, a question you have never, ever thought about before. So what on earth do you do when you get a question on a topic like mirrors, or robots, or even something totally random like primary colors? How do you keep speaking fluently when you feel like you have absolutely nothing to say? Okay, here it is. This is the phrase you need. Using a strategic phrase like this does 3 things all at once. It acknowledges the question, it buys you precious thinking time, and it lets you transition smoothly into an answer. It shows you're flexible, which is exactly what the examiner wants to see. Let's see it in action. Imagine you get that question about mirrors. Instead of freezing up, you just admit you haven't considered it, and then you start thinking out loud. But I suppose I use them. This is what fluent communication is all about. It is not a knowledge test. And here's a slight variation. That's a tricky one. See, you're acknowledging the difficulty, which is a totally natural thing to do, and then you just start speculating. The goal is to keep talking, keep the fluency going while you figure out your idea on the spot. And what about a super random topic like primary colors? Same deal. Look how this works. You state that you've never considered it, you just make a choice, and you give a simple reason. You've stayed calm, you bought yourself a moment, and you've still given a perfectly developed answer. And before we wrap up, here is a really crucial pro tip from us at the IELTS Focus. Aim for your Part 1 answers to be about 2 or 3 sentences long. That's it. You need to extend, but you don't want to ramble. And if the examiner cuts you off, do not panic. It's actually a good sign. It just means they've heard enough good stuff and need to move on. So when you really get down to it, a Band 9.0 performance isn't about giving perfect memorized answers. It's about showing you can communicate naturally and flexibly right there in the moment. So the real question for you is this. Are you ready to stop just answering questions and actually start having a conversation?